I clutched my carry-on bag tighter as I navigated through the crowded terminal, flinching when someone brushed past me too quickly. 3 days since I'd left, and every sudden movement still felt like David's hand coming to grab me. The bruises on my ribs had faded from angry purple to a sickly yellow, but they still ached with each breath. Freedom hurt almost as much as captivity. Final boarding call for Flight 1762 to Chicago. The announcer's voice crackled through the speakers. My new life was waiting at the gate, but my feet felt leaden. What if he found me? What if this was all for nothing? The cash I'd squirreled away over the past year wouldn't last long. The cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years might turn me away when I showed up on her doorstep. But anything was better than one more night under his roof. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant, avoiding eye contact. David always said my eyes gave everything away. Like reading a goddamn book, he'd snarl before the accusations began. I'd learned to look down, to make myself smaller, invisible. "Have a nice flight," the attendant said, but I was already shuffling down the jetway. The plane was nearly full. I made my way down the narrow aisle, counting row numbers like heartbeats. 17, 18, 19. Window seat 20A, there it was. My sanctuary for the next 2 hours. I stowed my bag and slid into my seat, immediately turning toward the window. Chicago. A fresh start. No one would know me there. No one would look at me with that awful mixture of pity and judgment that I'd grown accustomed to in our small Florida town. Why doesn't she just leave him? If it was that bad, she would go. They never understood how fear can become a prison with invisible bars stronger than steel. The cabin filled with the usual sounds. Overhead compartments slamming shut, children whining, the steady hum of the air conditioning that couldn't quite mask the stale smell of recycled air. I pressed my forehead against the cool window and closed my eyes. I'd barely slept in days. "Excuse me." The voice was deep, quiet, controlled. I startled, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs as I turned. My first impression was of darkness. Dark suit, expertly tailored to broad shoulders, dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He stood in the aisle, one hand resting casually on the seat in front of mine, the other holding a phone that he slipped into his pocket as our eyes met. "I believe I have the aisle seat," he said, gesturing to 20C. "Oh, yes, sorry." I instinctively pressed myself closer to the window, making myself smaller. There was something about him, a stillness, a weight to his presence that made the air feel suddenly thinner. He sat with the practiced ease of someone who spent a lot of time on planes. His cologne reached me, something expensive and subtle. Sandalwood and something sharper beneath, like the air before a storm, no wedding ring. A watch that probably cost more than everything I owned. He nodded once to me, a small courtesy, then turned his attention to the flight attendant approaching our row. "Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice pitched low but unable to mask her deference. "Everything is arranged as requested. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" "No, thank you, Diane." He knew her name. The flight attendant, Diane, smiled and continued down the aisle, but not before giving me a curious glance. I shrank further into my seat. The middle seat between us remained empty. A small mercy. As the safety demonstration began, I noticed more details about my row companion from the corner of my eye, the way other passengers seemed to instinctively avert their gaze when passing our row. The slight bulge beneath his jacket that might have been a gun, the way his eyes constantly scanned the cabin, assessing, cataloging. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt strangely calm, whatever this man was, and he was definitely something. He wasn't looking at me. After years of being the focal point of someone's rage, being invisible felt like a blessing. The plane began to move, taxiing toward the runway. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles whitening. I'd only flown once before, years ago, before David. Before I became a shadow. First time flying? His voice again, still quiet, still controlled, but with a hint of something I couldn't identify. Not quite amusement. Interest, maybe. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Afraid then. It wasn't a question. I risked looking at him directly. His face gave nothing away, It might have been carved from stone. But those dark eyes were watching me with an intensity that made me want to hide and step into the light simultaneously. "Not of flying," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Something shifted in his expression. A subtle tightening around the eyes, a slight narrowing of focus. For a long, uncomfortable moment, he studied me, and I had the distinct impression I was being read, analyzed, my secrets extracted and examined. "Good," he said finally. "Fear of the wrong things can get you killed." The plane accelerated down the runway, pressing me back against my seat. As we lifted into the air, leaving Florida and David and my old life behind, I wondered if I'd just made another terrible mistake. Because for a brief, insane moment, I wanted to ask him what the right things to fear were. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The man, Mr. Moretti, unbuckled his seatbelt, but made no move to stand. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, plain white, with only a name and number embossed in black. With long, steady fingers, he placed it on the empty middle seat between us. "In case you need options," he said, his eyes never leaving my face. I stared at the card, not touching it. "Options for what?" "Whatever you're running from." His voice was matter of fact, as though he was discussing the weather and not casually dismantling the careful blankness I'd worked so hard to maintain. My throat closed up. "I'm not—" "Your left wrist has the fading marks of fingers that grabbed too hard." He cut me off, his tone unchanged. "You flinch at sudden movements. You've chosen a window seat with your back to the wall, and you haven't taken your eyes off the exit since you sat down. You're traveling alone with one small bag, no check-in luggage. Your wedding ring is gone, but the tan line isn't." I felt exposed, flayed open. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. "Who are you?" I managed. His smile didn't reach his eyes, someone who recognizes prey when he sees it. The plane hit turbulence, shuddering slightly. I gripped the armrests again, but it wasn't the turbulence making me shake. "I don't need help from a stranger," I said, finding a small scrap of defiance I thought had been beaten out of me years ago. He nodded, as though I'd confirmed something, and yet here you are, running with no destination, no plan beyond escape. "I have a plan," I lied. "I have somewhere to go." "A relative you haven't spoken to in years? A friend who doesn't know you're coming? A shelter?" Each guess hit like a physical blow. "You think he won't find you? How could you possibly—" "Men like your husband," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "They don't let go of what they consider theirs, not without consequences." The flight attendant approached with the drink cart. Mr. Moretti fell silent, leaning back in his seat. I ordered a water I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. He declined with a slight shake of his head. When she moved on, the card still lay untouched between us. "Who are you?" I asked again. "Someone who can ensure he never touches you again." A chill ran through me, not entirely from fear. "You mean like a lawyer?" This time his smile seemed genuine, if brief. "Not exactly." I should have been frightened. I should have called the flight attendant, asked to change seats, done anything other than continue this conversation. Instead, I found myself reaching for the card, turning it over in my hands. It felt heavy, expensive. The name embossed on it, Alessandro Moretti, seemed to shimmer under the cabin lights. "What would it cost me?" I asked, because nothing in my experience came without a price. "A conversation," he said. "After we land." Just a conversation? For now? The threat, or was it a promise, hung between us. I slipped the card into my pocket, not committing to anything but unwilling to reject it outright. Something in his certainty made me want to believe him, which was exactly how I'd ended up with David in the first place. "I don't even know you," I said, more to myself than to him. "No," he agreed, "but I'm beginning to know you, Emma Taylor." My blood froze. I hadn't told him my name. I hadn't used my real name on anything since I'd left David 3 days ago. The ID in my bag was the new one my friend had helped me obtain, under my mother's maiden name. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know things," he said simply. Just as I know your husband has already filed a missing persons report. Just as I know he's contacted the police in 3 states, including Illinois. Just as I know the credit card you used to book this flight was flagged this morning. The cabin seemed to close in around me. David had found me. He was waiting in Chicago. The breath rushed from my lungs, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. "Breathe," Moretti commanded, his voice cutting through my panic. "He doesn't know you're on this flight. Not yet. But he will, within the hour, when the airline confirms the passenger list. I have to get off," I gasped, fumbling with my seatbelt despite the fact that we were 30,000 feet in the air. "I have to—" His hand covered mine, stopping my frantic movements. His palm was warm, dry, steady. "You're safer here, with me, than anywhere else at the moment." "Why?" I demanded, pulling my hand away. "Why would you help me? What do you want?" For the first time, he seemed to consider his words carefully. "Let's just say I have a particular hatred for men who use their strength against those weaker than themselves." "I'm not weak," I snapped, surprising myself. His eyes warmed fractionally. "No," he agreed, "you're not," which makes his behavior all the more unforgivable. The plane hit another patch of turbulence, more severe this time. Drinks sloshed, passengers murmured, the seatbelt sign dinged back on. Alessandro Moretti didn't seem to notice. "When we land," he said, "you have a choice. Walk away, take your chances with a man who's already proven he'll hurt you to keep you. Or come with me, and I guarantee he'll never touch you again." "You can't guarantee that," I whispered. "You don't know David." "I don't need to know him," Moretti replied. "I only need to make him understand what will happen if he comes near you again." A flight attendant approached, leaning close to Moretti. "Sir, there's a call for you in the cockpit. The captain said it's urgent." He nodded once, then turned back to me. "Think about it. You have approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes to decide." As he rose and followed the flight attendant toward the front of the plane, I found myself staring after him, my heart pounding with a new kind of fear. Because despite everything inside me screaming that this man was dangerous, that I was jumping from one fire into another, a tiny voice whispered that for the first time in years, I had a choice. And I was terrified I already knew which one I would make. Alessandro Moretti returned to his seat 20 minutes later, his face impassive, but tension radiating from him like heat. He sat down with controlled precision, adjusting his cuffs, platinum cufflinks catching the light, before turning those penetrating eyes on me again. "Your situation has become more complicated," he said without preamble. My fingers dug into the armrest. "What do you mean?" "Your husband isn't just waiting in Chicago. He's managed to convince the police that you're mentally unstable and potentially suicidal." His voice remained calm, but there was an undercurrent of something that might have been anger. "There will be officers waiting at the gate." The cabin seemed to tilt beneath me. "He can't do that. He can't just—" "He already has." Moretti's jaw tightened slightly. 3 witness statements, his brother, his best friend, and your former therapist. "Dr. Winters?" I whispered, disbelief washing over me. "But she knows. She saw the bruises. She told me I needed to leave, and yet she signed a statement saying you've been self-harming and experiencing paranoid delusions." He watched my face crumble and added more softly, "Money changes people's memories." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls of my carefully constructed escape plan collapse. Dr. Winters had been my one ally, the only person who'd believed me when I'd finally found the courage to speak the truth. And David had gotten to her. "If they take me back to him, he'll kill me," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Something dangerous flashed in Moretti's eyes. "That won't happen. You don't understand. He's a respected businessman. Everyone loves him. No one believes he's capable of—" My voice broke. Even with evidence, the police never did anything. They always said it was a domestic dispute. Moretti's expression didn't change, but the temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees. "The police won't be a problem. How can you say that? They're literally waiting to hand me over to him." "Because," he said with quiet certainty, "they answer to people who answer to me." A chill ran through me. Who was this man? What kind of power did he have that made him so confident? And why was he using it to help me, a stranger? Before I could ask any of these questions, he pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and waited. When someone answered, he spoke in rapid Italian, his voice low but commanding. I caught words here and there, my high school Italian barely passable, but enough to understand he was giving orders, not making requests. After a brief conversation, he ended the call and returned the phone to his pocket. "We won't be landing at the main terminal," he said. "Arrangements have been made for a private hangar." I stared at him. "You can do that? Just change where a commercial flight lands?" "Yes." No explanation. No elaboration. Just absolute certainty. "Why are you helping me?" I asked again, desperately needing to understand. He studied me for a long moment. 5 years ago, I had a sister, Francesca. His eyes never left mine, but I sensed he was seeing someone else. "She married a man very much like your David. Charming, respected, wealthy." His voice hardened. Possessive, controlling, violent when crossed. My breath caught. "What happened to her?" "She tried to 3 times. His expression remained neutral, but something terrible lived in his eyes. "The 3rd time, he found her at our mother's house. He claimed it was an accident, that he pushed her, and she fell down the stairs. I'm so sorry," I whispered, understanding now the source of his unexpected intervention. "I was in Milan on business. By the time I returned, he had already been cleared of all charges." Moretti's fingers tapped once against his thigh, the only outward sign of emotion. 2 days later, he disappeared. His body was never found. The implication hung in the air between us. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt an illicit rush of something close to satisfaction. Someone had finally made one of these men pay. "You killed him," I said, not a question. "I ensured justice was served," he corrected mildly. "Something the legal system failed to do." The plane hit another pocket of turbulence. Outside the window, darkness was falling, the sunset bleeding red across the horizon. I thought about what awaited me in Chicago. Police ready to classify me as mentally unstable, ready to hand me back to the man who'd promised to kill me if I ever left. "If I accept your help," I said slowly, "what happens next?" "You disappear," he replied. "A new identity, a new location, financial support until you're established." "And what do you get out of it?" His lips curved in something not quite a smile. "As I said, a conversation. About what?" "Your husband's business partners." Confusion washed over me. "I don't know anything about David's business. He never talked about work with me. But you heard things?" Moretti pressed. "Names, phone calls, meetings, information you might not even realize is important." I frowned, trying to understand the angle. "Are you law enforcement?" This time, he did smile, a flash of teeth that held no humor. Quite the opposite. The realization struck me with sudden clarity. The deference of the flight staff, the private phone calls, the ability to reroute a commercial flight, the hints about people who answered to him. Alessandro Moretti wasn't just rich or connected. He was dangerous, powerful in ways that existed outside the law. "You're in the Mafia," I said, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. He didn't confirm or deny it. He didn't need to. "Does that change your decision?" It should have. Any sane person would have called for the flight attendant, created a scene, done anything to distance themselves. Instead, I found myself considering what he was offering. Freedom, safety, the chance to start over without constantly looking over my shoulder. "Why my husband?" I asked instead. "What's your interest in him?" Moretti's expression darkened. "David Taylor isn't just an abusive husband. He's involved in things that have crossed into my territory. Specifically, human trafficking through ports my family controls." The world tilted beneath me again. "That's not possible. David runs investment portfolios. He's in finance." A convenient cover, one of many. He studied my shocked expression. "You truly didn't know." I shook my head numbly. "He has late meetings sometimes, business trips. But I never..." My stomach lurched as memories rearranged themselves. The locked office I wasn't allowed to enter. The late-night phone calls in languages I didn't understand. The unexplained cash. Oh God. This isn't just about helping you escape an abusive situation, Emma, Moretti said quietly. Though that remains my primary concern. Your husband has made powerful enemies. Sooner or later, those enemies will find him. And when they do, anyone associated with him becomes collateral damage. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. So you're helping me out of professional courtesy? Something like respect flickered in his eyes. I'm helping you because no woman deserves to live in fear. The information you may have is a secondary consideration. The plane began its initial descent. The change in pressure making my ears pop. Time was running out. Decision time. If I go with you, I said slowly, how do I know I won't just be trading one prison for another? You don't, he answered with unexpected honesty. But I give you my word that you will be free to leave at any time, once your safety is secured. I don't keep people against their will. That's your husband's crime, not mine. Your word doesn't mean anything to me, I said, finding courage I didn't know I still possessed. I don't know you. Rather than anger, my defiance seemed to please him. Good, he said. You're learning. Trust should be earned, not given. He reached inside his jacket and withdrew a small leather case, opening it to reveal what looked like a passport and several bundles of cash. Take this. There's enough money here to get you anywhere in the country. A passport under a new name, and contact information for people who can help you disappear. I stared at the case but didn't take it. And if I refuse your help entirely? Then you're on your own the moment we land, he said simply. I won't intervene if the police take you. I won't stop your husband from finding you. Whatever happens will be the consequence of your choice. Harsh, but honest. After years of David's manipulations, the straightforward brutality was almost refreshing. And if I take your help but refuse to tell you anything about David? Then you get a new start anyway. He placed the case on the empty middle seat. The information is valuable to me, but not at the expense of my conscience. The seatbelt sign dinged on as the captain announced our final descent. My time was up. I reached for the case, my fingers brushing against his as I took it. An electric current seemed to run between us. Danger recognizing danger, perhaps. I slipped it into my carry-on bag. I'll go with you, I said finally, but I reserve the right to walk away once we land if anything feels wrong. He nodded once, accepting my terms. When we land, follow my lead. Stay close. Don't speak to anyone. The plane banked sharply, circling for its approach. I looked out the window at the twinkling lights of Chicago spread out below us. Somewhere down there, David was waiting, expecting to reclaim what he considered his property. The thought made my skin crawl. He'll never stop looking for me, I said, more to myself than to Moretti. Yes, he agreed. He will. The certainty in his voice made me turn to look at him. Once I'm finished, David Taylor will never harm another woman again. There was a finality to his words that should have horrified me. Instead, I felt something hard and cold settle in my chest, a kernel of justice long denied. Good, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan. Moretti fastened his seatbelt, then reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch surprisingly gentle. When this is over, he said, you'll be free. That's my promise to you, Emma Taylor. As the plane touched down on the runway, taxiing toward a distant hangar instead of the main terminal, I realized I believed him. Whether that made me brave or foolish remained to be seen. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers around us began the usual routine of gathering belongings and standing too early in the aisle. Moretti remained seated, one hand casually resting on his thigh, the other holding his phone as he checked messages. Wait for everyone else to disembark, he instructed without looking up. Through the window, I could see several black SUVs parked on the tarmac, men in dark suits standing beside them. Moretti's men, I assumed. My pulse quickened. What about my bag in the overhead compartment? I asked, suddenly realizing I might not get a chance to retrieve it. Leave it. Everything you need will be provided. A flight attendant approached our row, leaning down to speak quietly to Moretti. Mr. Moretti, We've been instructed to let you disembark first through the rear exit. Is there anything else you require? No. Thank you, Diane. Again, that easy command, the immediate deference. As the last passengers filed past our row, Moretti stood and buttoned his jacket in one fluid motion. He offered me his hand. Stay close, he reminded me. I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, reassuring in its strength. We moved against the flow of passengers, heading toward the rear of the plane where a second jetway had been attached. No one questioned us. No one even looked at us directly. At the threshold between the plane and whatever awaited us outside, I faltered. Moretti sensed my hesitation and turned, still holding my hand. Second thoughts? He asked, his dark eyes searching mine. No, I said, realizing it was true. Just wondering if I'm jumping from the frying pan into the fire. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. The difference, Emma, is that I'm not trying to burn you. With that, he led me off the plane and into the gathering darkness, away from my past and toward an uncertain future, one where, for the first time in years, I wasn't alone. The air outside hit me like a slap, colder than Florida, carrying the metallic tang of an approaching storm. Moretti guided me down the stairs to the tarmac, his hand at the small of my back, light but unmistakably protective. 4 men waited beside the nearest SUV, their stances casual but alert. They watched our approach with blank expressions, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Stay here, Moretti murmured, releasing me to step forward and confer with a tall man whose salt and pepper hair and weathered face suggested experience. They spoke rapidly in Italian, voices low. I caught the occasional word, polizia, problema, marito, husband. My stomach clenched. Rain began to fall, fat drops that quickly turned into a steady downpour. Within seconds, my thin blouse was soaked through, my hair plastered to my face. I hugged myself, shivering, but made no move to seek shelter. Every instinct screamed to run, but where would I go? Back to David? Into the anonymous sprawl of Chicago with no money, no ID, no plan? Moretti glanced back, noted my condition, and instantly shrugged out of his jacket, returning to drape it over my shoulders. The weight of it surprised me, heavier than it looked, still warm from his body, saturated with that sandalwood cologne that now struck me as both comforting and dangerous. The gesture was so unexpected, so unlike the calculated cruelty I'd grown accustomed to with David, that tears pricked at my eyes. We need to move, he said, studying my face with an intensity that made me want to hide. There's been a complication. What kind of complication? I pulled his jacket tighter around me. Your husband's reach extends further than anticipated. Something like grudging respect colored his tone. He's managed to get private security clearance for this area. They'll be here within 10 minutes. How is that possible? Panic fluttered in my chest. He's just an investment banker. Moretti's expression darkened. No, he's not. And the sooner you accept that, the safer you'll be. He gestured toward the waiting SUV. We need to go, now. As if to emphasize his point, the distant sound of sirens cut through the drumming rain. One of Moretti's men spoke urgently into a phone, while another opened the vehicle's rear door. What if this is a mistake? I whispered, suddenly paralyzed with indecision. What if I'm making things worse? Emma. Moretti stepped closer, sheltering me from the rain, his voice lowered so only I could hear. In 30 seconds, I'm getting into that car. You can come with me, or you can stay and take your chances with your husband's security team. But understand this. If you stay, I can't help you again. This is your only opportunity. The sirens grew louder. Lights flashed in the distance. Why? I asked desperately. Why are you risking yourself for me? Something shifted in his expression. A momentary softening. A glimpse of the man beneath the dangerous exterior. Because 24 hours after my sister died, a package arrived at my house. A video of her begging for help, filmed the week before she was killed. She'd sent it to dozens of people. Friends, police, even a women's shelter. No one helped her. His jaw tightened. I won't have that on my conscience again. The raw honesty in his voice reached something inside me that had been closed off for years. I nodded once and moved toward the SUV. Moretti's hand at my back guided me into the back seat. Then he slid in beside me. The door closed with a solid thunk that spoke of bulletproof reinforcement. The interior was pristine black leather, the windows tinted to near opacity. 2 men got in the front, including the older one Moretti had spoken with, while the others entered a second vehicle behind us. "Go," Moretti commanded, and the SUV surged forward, tires squealing on the wet tarmac. Through the rear window, I watched as police cars and black sedans converged on the area we'd just vacated. In the distance, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the rain, watching our departure. "Is that—" I began, my voice catching. "Yes," Moretti confirmed, his eyes on the same figure. "That's your husband." Even from this distance, I recognized David's stance. Feet planted wide, fists clenched at his sides, radiating the cold fury that preceded his worst violence. A shudder ran through me. "He's going to be so angry," I whispered, the words automatic, a relic from my years of anticipating his rage. Moretti's hand covered mine where it lay trembling on the seat between us. "His anger is no longer your concern." The driver navigated through back roads and service entries, eventually merging onto a highway heading away from the city center. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rumbling overhead. No one spoke. The radio remained off. Only the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers broke the silence. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "Somewhere secure," Moretti replied, his attention on his phone. "We'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your options." "What about David? If he found out about this flight, he could find out where we're going." The older man in the passenger seat snorted softly. "Not possible," he said, his accent thicker than Moretti's. "Marco is right," Moretti added. "The vehicles are clean. No tracking devices. The property isn't connected to any of my known businesses." He glanced up from his phone. "Even if your husband has the connections I suspect he does, it would take him days to trace us." "And by then?" I asked. "By then, you'll be long gone. Somewhere he can never find you." The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it filled me with a strange melancholy. Starting over meant leaving everything behind. Not just David, but the few friends I still had, my job at the library, the city I'd called home for a decade. Freedom, I was learning, came with its own kind of grief. "What about you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Moretti looked up, surprise briefly crossing his features before his expression smoothed back to neutral. "What about me? After tomorrow? After I disappear? What happens to you?" He studied me for a long moment, as though trying to decipher my motivation for asking. "I return to my business. And David?" "I deal with him." 3 simple words that contained multitudes. I should have objected, should have insisted on police involvement, legal channels, restraining orders. All the things I'd tried before, all the systems that had failed to protect me. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "He'll hurt someone else," I said quietly. "If not me, then whoever comes after." Moretti's eyes held mine, understanding passing between us. "No," he said. "He won't." The SUV turned onto a private road, winding through dense trees that blocked out what little daylight remained. After several miles, we approached a gate manned by 2 security guards who waved us through without stopping. Beyond, a large house came into view. Modern, all clean lines and glass, perched on the edge of what appeared to be a lake. "Yours?" I asked, taking in the manicured grounds and multiple security cameras. "One of several properties," he replied. "This one is particularly secure." The SUV pulled up to the front entrance where a woman waited, holding an umbrella. As we exited the vehicle, she stepped forward. "Mr. Moretti," she acknowledged with a nod, then turned to me with a professional smile. "Ms. Taylor, I'm Helena. I'll be seeing to your needs during your stay." I blinked in surprise, glancing at Moretti. "How did she—" "I called ahead," he explained, guiding me toward the door with that now familiar hand at the small of my back. Inside, the house was as impressive as its exterior. Soaring ceilings, Minimalist furniture in creams and grays, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the stormy lake beyond. Despite its grandeur, it felt strangely impersonal, like an upscale hotel rather than a home. "Helena will show you to your room," Moretti said, checking his watch. "I have some business to attend to. We'll have dinner in 2 hours, if that suits you." It wasn't really a question, but I appreciated the pretense of choice. "Yes, thank you. I've taken the liberty of providing some clothes and necessities," he added. "If anything is unsuitable, Helena can arrange alternatives." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I need to take this. Helena will see to your comfort." With that, he strode away, already speaking rapid Italian into his phone, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Helena gestured toward a sweeping staircase. "This way, please." I followed her up to the second floor and down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. She opened a door to reveal a suite larger than my entire apartment back in Florida, a king-sized bed, sitting area, and a bathroom glimpsed through an open door that featured a soaking tub big enough for 3 people. "There are clothes in the closet," Helena informed me, gesturing to a walk-in the size of my former kitchen. "Toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything, press 0 on the house phone." "Thank you," I said, still clutching Moretti's jacket around my shoulders. "Does Mr. Moretti bring many guests here?" Helena's expression revealed nothing. "Mr. Moretti values his privacy, and yours." She moved toward the door. "Dinner will be served at 8 in the dining room. I'll come to escort you." After she left, I stood motionless in the center of the room, water from my soaked clothes pooling on the hardwood floor. The silence was oppressive after years of constant vigilance, of attuning myself to David's footsteps, his moods, the specific sound of his key in the lock. I shrugged off Moretti's jacket, carefully hanging it over a chair, then headed to the bathroom. The mirror above the sink reflected a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, with a fading yellowish bruise at her temple partially concealed by wet hair. I lifted my blouse to reveal the constellation of healing marks across my ribs. Evidence. Proof. Not that it had ever made a difference before. The shower was heavenly, hot water pounding against sore muscles, washing away the grime of travel and fear. I used the provided shampoo, breathing in the scent of lavender and allowing myself, just for a moment, to believe I might actually be safe. Clean and wrapped in a plush robe, I explored the closet. The clothes were new, tags still attached, in a variety of styles, but all approximately my size. I selected black trousers and a simple blue sweater, both of which fit surprisingly well. As I dressed, a thought struck me with paralyzing force. David knew I was with Moretti. He'd seen us leaving together. Whatever resources he had, and apparently they were significant, would now be focused not just on finding me, but on the man who had taken me. My hand froze in the act of brushing my hair. Had I simply traded one dangerous man for another, putting Moretti in David's crosshairs in the process? A knock at the door startled me from these thoughts. I opened it to find Helena, precisely as promised. "Mr. Moretti is waiting," she said. I followed her back downstairs and through the main living area to a formal dining room where Moretti stood gazing out at the storm, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He'd changed into a fresh suit, charcoal gray this time, his hair still damp from his own shower. He turned as we entered, his eyes sweeping over me in a quick assessment that felt more clinical than intrusive. "You look better," he observed. "The clothes fit well enough?" "Yes, thank you." I remained by the door, uncertain of the protocol in this strange situation. "Your jacket." I left it upstairs. "It's of no consequence." He gestured to the table, set for 2 with fine china and crystal. "Please sit." The meal was served by a silent staff member. Soup, followed by grilled fish, vegetables, and a dessert I was too nervous to eat. Moretti ate sparingly, his attention split between me and his phone, which periodically lit up with messages. The only sound was the clink of silverware and the storm raging outside. "You have questions," he said finally, setting down his fork. "Ask them." I set down my own utensils, my appetite gone. "Who are you? Really?" You've already deduced the answer. I'm the head of the Moretti family. We control shipping interests throughout the Great Lakes region. Shipping interests sounds like a euphemism. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Among other business ventures, yes. And my husband crossed you? Your husband, he said, his voice hardening, has been moving product through my ports without permission, product that includes young women from Eastern Europe. My stomach turned. Human trafficking. Yes, an enterprise I do not tolerate on my territory, regardless of the profit margin. He took a sip of his wine. Your husband is ambitious, but careless. He left evidence. And you need me to help you find this evidence? I already have enough to move against him. What I need from you is context. Names, locations, patterns of behavior that might lead me to his associates. So I'm just information to you. The realization stung more than it should have. A means to an end. Moretti studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Initially, yes. When I boarded that flight, you were nothing more than a fortunate coincidence. The wife of a man I intended to destroy. And now? He leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. Now, I find myself invested in your well-being beyond your utility. Why? I pressed. Because you remind me of Francesca. The admission seemed to cost him something. Not in appearance, but in spirit. She had the same look in her eyes when I last saw her. The look of someone who has decided to live, no matter the cost. Thunder crashed outside, momentarily darkening the room before the backup generators hummed to life. In that brief darkness, I saw Moretti not as the dangerous man he undoubtedly was, but as someone carrying his own scars, his own regrets. I'm sorry about your sister, I said softly. As am I. He pushed his plate away. Which is why I won't allow history to repeat itself. You think David would kill me. I know he would. The certainty in his voice chilled me. Men like that don't allow what they consider their property to simply walk away. I'm not property, I said, the words coming out sharper than intended. No, he agreed, his gaze intensifying. You're not. You're a survivor, Emma. And survivors adapt. Before I could respond, his phone rang again. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Excuse me, I need to take this. As he stepped away from the table, speaking in low, urgent tones, I caught fragments. Security breach. Perimeter. Lock it down. He returned moments later, all traces of our almost personal conversation gone, replaced by cold efficiency. We have a situation, he said. Your husband works faster than anticipated. My blood ran cold. He's here? Not yet. But his men have been spotted on the access road. He moved around the table, offering his hand. We need to move you to a more secure location. How did he find us so quickly? Moretti's expression was grim. That's what I intend to find out. Moretti led me through a door hidden behind wood paneling in the dining room, revealing a narrow hallway I hadn't noticed before. His hand gripped mine firmly as we descended a flight of stairs, the temperature dropping with each step. The faint sound of the storm above faded, replaced by the hum of machinery and the soft beep of electronic systems. What is this place? I asked, my voice hushed despite myself. A precaution, he replied, punching a code into a keypad beside a steel door. All my properties have secure rooms. The door slid open to reveal what looked like a combination of luxury bunker and command center. Comfortable seating, a small kitchenette, and several monitors displaying camera feeds from around the property. Marco, the older man from the car, was already inside, speaking rapidly into a headset. Status? Moretti demanded. Marco switched to English for my benefit. 3 vehicles approaching from the South Road. 6 men confirmed, possibly more. They've disabled the first layer of security cameras, but our backups are still operational. Police involvement? Negative. They're keeping this private. Marco's eyes flickered to me. They're professionals. Military background, based on their movements. David doesn't know ex-military. I interjected. He's not that kind of person. Moretti and Marco exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. What aren't you telling me? I asked. Moretti turned to face me directly. Your husband isn't just involved in human trafficking. Based on our intelligence, He's part of a larger organization, one with connections to private military contractors. The kind of people who don't leave witnesses. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. No, I said, shaking my head. That's not possible. I lived with him for 5 years. I would have known if he was some kind of criminal. Would you? Moretti's voice was gentle but insistent. You said yourself he kept his business separate from your marriage. Late meetings, locked office, unexplained income. Memories flooded back, the strange phone calls in the middle of the night, the men who would come to the house when I was supposed to be out, the safe behind the painting in his study that I'd discovered by accident and never mentioned. All the small inconsistencies I'd explained away because the truth was unthinkable. Oh God, I whispered, sinking onto a nearby chair. Who did I marry? A man who hid his true nature, Moretti said, his attention divided between me and the monitors. You're not responsible for his deception. A harsh laugh escaped me. No. I'm just the idiot who didn't see it. Moretti knelt before me, bringing his face level with mine, his hands covering my trembling ones. Listen to me. Predators like your husband are expert manipulators. They show you exactly what you want to see, what you need to see, until you're too entangled to escape. That you found the courage to leave at all shows extraordinary strength. His unexpected compassion threatened to unravel me completely. I bit my lip hard, fighting back tears that wouldn't help anyone. One of the monitors flashed red, drawing Moretti's attention. He straightened immediately, all business again. They've breached the outer gate, Marco reported. ETA 4 minutes to the house. Moretti pulled a handgun from his shoulder holster, checking it with practiced efficiency before returning it to its place. Helena and the staff? Already evacuated through the east tunnel. Good. He turned to me. Emma, I need you to stay here with Marco. This room is secure. Reinforced walls, separate ventilation, its own power supply. No one can get in without the code. Panic surged through me. Where are you going? To deal with our visitors. They could kill you, I protested, rising to my feet. Something like surprise flickered across his face. Your concern is noted, but unnecessary. This isn't my first security breach. It's my husband coming for me, I insisted. This is my problem. No, Moretti said firmly. The moment he crossed into my territory, he became my problem. He checked his watch. I'll return within the hour. If I don't, Marco has instructions to move you through the tunnel system to a secondary location. Before I could argue further, he took my face between his hands and kissed my forehead, a gesture so unexpected, so at odds with his dangerous persona that I froze. Trust me, he murmured against my skin, just this once. Then he was gone, the steel door sliding shut behind him with a definitive click. Marco avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the security feeds. I moved closer to the monitors, watching as Moretti appeared in one of them, conferring with 4 armed men in the main foyer. Their conversation was brief. The men took positions throughout the house, while Moretti himself moved to the living room, casually pouring himself a drink, as though expecting guests for a social call. He's using himself as bait, I realized aloud. Marco grunted in confirmation. Boss knows what he's doing. Been handling situations like this since he was 20. How long have you worked for him? I asked, unable to tear my eyes from the screen. 30 years. Since before he was born. A hint of pride colored Marco's voice. Worked for his father first. You're loyal to him. With my life. He glanced at me finally. And not because I'm paid to be. I wanted to ask more, but movement on another monitor caught my attention. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the front of the house, and men poured out. 8, by my count. All armed, moving with military precision. They're going to kill him, I breathed, cold fear washing over me. Marco shook his head. Boss has been in worse situations. Watch. On the screen, Moretti sat calmly in an armchair, swirling his drink as the front door burst open. 2 men entered first, weapons raised, sweeping the room before signaling to someone outside. A moment later, a familiar figure stepped through the door. David. My husband looked exactly as he always did. Handsome, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating confidence and control. Only those who knew him intimately would recognize the slight tightness around his mouth, the cold calculation in his eyes that preceded his most vicious moments. "Mr. Taylor," Moretti greeted him, not bothering to stand. "Your invitation seems to have been lost in the mail." David's smile was razor-sharp. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize for the unconventional arrival, but you have something that belongs to me." My skin crawled at being referred to as a possession, even from this distance. "I assume you're referring to your wife," Moretti replied, taking a deliberate sip of his drink. "She's not here." "Don't insult my intelligence," David snapped. "I saw you leave the airport with her, and now she's gone. Somewhere you'll never find her." Moretti set his glass down and finally rose to his feet. "You're trespassing on my property, Mr. Taylor. I suggest you leave while that remains an option." David laughed, the sound sending ice down my spine even through the monitor. "You don't seem to understand the situation. I have 8 armed men. You appear to be alone, and I want my wife back." "Your wife left you," Moretti countered, his voice hardening. "She made her choice. Emma doesn't make choices," David said dismissively. "She does what she's told, eventually." Rage flared hot and unexpected in my chest. 5 years of manipulation, of gradual isolation, of being told what to think and how to feel, all distilled into that single contemptuous statement. "She made one choice very clearly," Moretti said, and I could hear the controlled anger in his voice now. "She chose to leave you, and I respect her decision." David's expression darkened. "You don't know anything about my marriage." "I know enough." Moretti moved closer, seemingly unconcerned by the weapons trained on him. "I know about the bruises. I know about the psychological torture. I know about the young women you traffic through my ports." Something shifted in David's demeanor. Surprise, quickly masked by cold calculation. "So that's what this is about, business." He smiled again. "We can discuss terms. I'm reasonable. Name your price for both, my wife and your silence." Moretti's laugh was chilling. "You misunderstand me, Mr. Taylor. This isn't a negotiation. This is me informing you that your operations in my territory are finished, and your wife is under my protection now." "Your protection?" David's voice dripped with insinuation. "How generous of you. Tell me, is she sharing your bed already, or did you at least wait until we crossed state lines?" I flinched at the accusation, so typical of David's tactics. Deflection, degradation, twisting the narrative to make me the villain. On screen, Moretti remained unruffled. "You really don't deserve her. Maybe not," David conceded with false magnanimity. "But she's still mine, and I always recover what belongs to me." He gestured to one of his men. "Search the house. Find her." The man moved to obey, but before he could take 2 steps, the lights went out. The security feed switched to night vision, bathing the scene in an eerie green glow. In the momentary confusion, shapes moved at the periphery of the room. Moretti's men, I realized, who had been waiting in shadow. What happened next was too fast to follow completely. Gunshots flashed. Figures lunged and fell. David was pulled behind his security team, shielded from the chaos. When the lights came back on seconds later, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. Half of David's men were down, while Moretti stood untouched, now holding a gun casually at his side. "As I was saying," Moretti continued as though there had been no interruption, "you're trespassing. This is your final opportunity to leave alive." David's face contorted with fury. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," Moretti replied. "I know exactly who you are, David Taylor. Or should I say, Daniel Tarkovsky. Former Special Operations, discharged under questionable circumstances. 5 years with a private military contractor in Eastern Europe before reinventing yourself as a respectable investment banker." The blood drained from David's face. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know my enemies." Moretti cut him off. "Just as I now know every detail of your trafficking operation, including your partners, your routes, and your offshore accounts. Information that would interest a great many people, from the FBI to the families of the women you've sold." David's expression shifted from shock to calculation. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something." Moretti moved closer, his voice dropping to a register that raised the hairs on my arms even through the monitor. Emma is no longer yours. She never was. And if you come near her again, if you so much as speak her name, what happens tonight will seem like a pleasant dream compared to what I'll do to you." "You're threatening me?" David laughed, though it sounded hollow. "Do you have any idea who I work for?" "I don't care if you work for the devil himself," Moretti replied. "In my territory, I am the only power that matters. You have 30 seconds to leave before I demonstrate that fact more permanently." For a tense moment, I thought David would push further. Then, with a terse nod to his remaining men, he backed toward the door. "This isn't over, Moretti. For your sake," Moretti replied. "I hope it is." After they departed, Moretti waited until the SUVs could be seen leaving on the exterior cameras. Only then did he holster his weapon and speak into what must have been a concealed microphone. Moments later, the steel door to our safe room slid open, and he appeared in the doorway. "It's clear," he announced. "For now." I rushed to Moretti without thinking, my hands reaching for his arms, eyes scanning for injuries. "Are you hurt? I saw the gunfire and—" "I'm fine," he assured me, seeming surprised by my concern. His hand covered mine where it rested on his sleeve. Everything went according to plan. "According to plan?" I repeated incredulously. "David found us in hours. He brought armed men to your house." "How is any of this according to plan?" A ghost of a smile touched Moretti's lips. "I needed to know who he's working with. The best way to do that was to force his hand." His expression grew serious again. "Now I know exactly what we're dealing with." "And what is that exactly?" He guided me back upstairs, his hand at the small of my back. A touch that was becoming strangely familiar. "Let's discuss it somewhere more comfortable." We returned to the main level, where Moretti's men were already cleaning up the evidence of the confrontation. No bodies remained, though dark stains on the marble floor suggested not everyone had walked away. I averted my eyes, feeling simultaneously horrified and relieved. In the kitchen, Moretti prepared 2 cups of coffee with the easy efficiency of someone accustomed to caring for himself. Despite his obvious wealth, he handed me one before leading me to a smaller, more intimate sitting room at the back of the house. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the storm still raging outside, lightning periodically illuminating the churning surface of the lake. "Your husband," he began, settling into an armchair across from me, "is working for the Bratva, Russian organized crime with significant operations throughout the Midwest. They've been trying to establish a foothold in my territory for years." I cradled the warm mug between my palms. "David isn't Russian." "No, but he worked for them in Eastern Europe before assuming his current identity. His specialty was logistics, moving people and products across borders without detection." Moretti sipped his coffee, his dark eyes never leaving my face. "Your marriage provided the perfect cover. Who would suspect a respectable investment banker with a librarian wife of running a human trafficking ring?" The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "I feel sick." "It's not your fault," Moretti said firmly. "You were selected precisely because you wouldn't suspect." "Selected," I repeated numbly. "Our entire relationship was a lie." "Perhaps." He set his cup down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Or perhaps he genuinely cared for you, in his way, but couldn't separate love from possession." "That's not love," I said, a surge of anger cutting through my shock. "Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't make you afraid to breathe wrong." "No," Moretti agreed quietly. "It doesn't." We sat in silence for a moment, the storm providing a dramatic backdrop to my swirling emotions. The life I'd thought I knew had been a carefully constructed fiction. The man I'd married was a stranger, worse than a stranger, a criminal who traded in human lives. And now I was sitting across from another dangerous man, one who had killed to protect me, whose world I'd been pulled into through no choice of my own. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Moretti met my gaze steadily. "Now, we prepare for your departure. David won't give up easily, especially with his employers pressuring him. You need to disappear. Completely new identity, new location, new life." "And you?" The question slipped out unbidden. "I'll deal with the threat to my business," he replied simply. Once your husband and his associates understand the consequences of operating in my territory, the immediate danger will pass. You mean you'll kill them? I said flatly. He didn't flinch from the accusation. I mean, I'll do whatever is necessary to protect what's mine. The possessive phrasing wasn't lost on me. I'm not yours either, Alessandro. Something flickered in his eyes at the use of his first name. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. No, he conceded. You're not. You belong to yourself now, Emma, but I have made your safety my responsibility. And I don't relinquish my responsibilities easily. The intensity of his gaze made my heart beat faster. There was danger there, certainly, but also something else. A recognition. A connection that had formed in the crucible of the past 24 hours. I don't want more blood on my hands, I said softly. The blood is on his hands, not yours. Moretti's voice was gentle but implacable. He made his choice when he hurt you, when he trafficked innocent women, when he came here tonight ready to kill. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the harsh planes of his face. In that brief, stark light, I saw something that had been missing from my life for years. Absolute certainty. Moretti might be dangerous, might operate outside the law I'd been raised to respect, but there was no deception in him. What you saw was what he was. I can't stay here, I realized aloud. Not just because of David, because of this. I gestured vaguely between us. Whatever this is. He nodded, understanding immediately. You need time, space, a chance to find yourself again without anyone's influence. His or mine. Yes. Relief flooded through me at being understood without having to explain. Then that's what you'll have. He rose and moved to a writing desk in the corner, returning with a small leather portfolio. These are for you. New passport, driver's license, credit cards, birth certificate. Everything you need to become Emily Wilson. I accepted the portfolio with trembling hands, opening it to find documents that looked perfectly authentic. How did you do this so quickly? I have resources, he said simply. The accounts are untraceable, funded with enough to keep you comfortable for at least 2 years, long enough to establish yourself, find work, create a new life. I can't take your money. Consider it compensation, he countered. For information about your husband's operation that will save me considerable time and expense. Information I haven't given you yet, I reminded him, but you will. It wasn't a question, because you understand now what's at stake. He was right. Whatever reservations I might have had about helping a known criminal, they paled in comparison to stopping David and his partners from trafficking more women. What do you need to know? I asked. For the next hour, I told him everything I could remember, names I'd overheard, locations David had mentioned, patterns of behavior that now took on sinister significance. Moretti listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification but never interrupting my flow of memories. When I finished, emotionally drained but somehow lighter, he nodded once in satisfaction. This is more than enough, he said. With this information, we can dismantle their entire Midwest operation within weeks. And David? Moretti's expression hardened. Will face consequences appropriate to his crimes. I wanted to press further, to extract a promise that no matter what else happened, David would pay specifically for what he'd done to me. But I recognized the dangerous territory such a request would lead us into. Better to let Moretti handle it in his way, without my explicit approval. When do I leave? I asked instead. Tomorrow morning. A private plane is being arranged to take you to Seattle. From there, you'll have 3 potential destinations to choose from. He handed me a sealed envelope. Don't tell me which you select. The less I know about your final location, the safer you'll be. You're really letting me go, I said, surprised despite his earlier assurances. I promised you freedom, he reminded me. I keep my promises. Morning came too quickly. After a night spent in fitful sleep, dreaming of David's cold eyes and Moretti's protective presence, I dressed in clothes provided for my new identity. Simple, practical items that wouldn't draw attention. The woman in the mirror looked different somehow. Still me, but with a straightness to her spine that hadn't been there before, a directness in her gaze that spoke of hard-won wisdom. Moretti was waiting in the foyer, conferring quietly with Marco. He dismissed the older man with a nod when he saw me descending the stairs. Everything is ready, he said, taking in my appearance with that same intense gaze. The car is waiting. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a crystal-clear morning. The lake sparkled in the distance, birds calling to each other across the water. It seemed impossible that just hours ago, violence had erupted in this peaceful setting. As we approached the waiting car, Moretti placed a hand on my arm, stopping me. "Emma," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something I want you to know." I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. "Yes. In another life, one where we met differently, where neither of us carried the scars we do, I would have asked to see you again." His eyes held mine, allowing me to see, just for a moment, the man beneath the dangerous exterior. "But in this life, the greatest gift I can give you is your freedom, without complications." My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Alessandro—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Don't say anything now. Live your new life. Heal. Become who you were always meant to be." He reached out to brush a strand of hair from my face, his touch feather-light. "Perhaps one day, if fate allows it, our paths will cross again. And if they do," I whispered, "then we'll see if Emily Wilson and Alessandro Moretti might have a different story than Emma Taylor and the man who helped her escape." He pressed something into my hand, a small pendant on a delicate chain, a key with an intricate design. "If you ever need me," he said, "this will lead you back. But my hope is that you never will." The implications were clear. This was both a lifeline and a release. He was giving me the means to return while expecting, perhaps even hoping, that I never would. Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me, not on the forehead this time, but gently on the lips. A kiss of possibility, not possession. A goodbye with a question mark attached. When we separated, I saw in his eyes the same conflicted emotions I felt: regret for what might have been under different circumstances, determination to do what was right rather than what was desired. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing no other words could encompass everything I felt. "For showing me I'm stronger than I believed." "You always were," he replied. "You just needed to remember." 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my apartment in a small coastal town in Oregon, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. Emily Wilson, librarian, community volunteer, woman with no past but a promising future, had built a quiet life here, one day at a time. The pendant Moretti had given me hung around my neck, a constant reminder of the choice he'd given me: to return or to move forward. Some nights, when memories of David's cruelty or flashes of Moretti's unexpected gentleness invaded my dreams, I'd hold it tightly, wondering about the road not taken. But most days, like today, I simply touched it briefly and smiled at how far I'd come. David's organization had been dismantled in a joint FBI local law enforcement operation 3 months ago, the news reports never mentioning the Moretti family's involvement. David himself had disappeared, no body found, no charges filed, simply gone. I knew better than to ask questions about his fate. As darkness fell over the ocean, I made a decision I'd been contemplating for weeks. I unclasped the pendant and held it in my palm, feeling its weight one last time. Then I placed it carefully in a small wooden box, alongside the identity papers for Emma Taylor, and locked it away in my closet, not throwing it away, not destroying the connection entirely. Just setting it aside. The key would remain there, available if ever needed, but no longer around my neck as a constant reminder of the past. Emily Wilson was ready to write her own story now, one where she wasn't defined by the men who had shaped her past, neither the one who had tried to break her, nor the one who had helped her escape. One day, perhaps, Alessandro Moretti might find a place in that story again, but if he did, it would be on my terms, as equals. For now, I had a life to live. My life, finally mine.